Well, my name is Julie. I'm the program director at Teen Esteem, and I am so excited to have Joe Ianora with us today. Joe is the counselor at Doherty Valley High School and friend of Teen Esteem, and has always given us so much wisdom and insight. So can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. So thanks for having me. Background, I've been in education a very long time. Started in the late 80s, and so I have about 30 years plus experience, all levels, but primarily working with teenagers. Admin credential, licensed MFT, marriage and family therapist.
Well, we really appreciate that you're here with us today. So Joe, in our previous conversations, you mentioned your concerns about students and what they're going through right now. Now, one of the things you mentioned reminded me, a lot of the parents that we're talking to are seeing depression. Sometimes it's their children who were already struggling. Mm-hmm. Some of it's new. Is there anything you can tell parents who are struggling with this?
Yeah, and this is so hard, right? I mean, because everybody's in the same boat, like we were saying earlier. So, I mean, look, you may have your own routine, and your kid is thrown out of their routine, and so it's you're able to help them. But now what's happening is you're off balance, they're off balance, and it makes tension. And so this is very difficult, right? Is we just got to stop and take a deep breath and say, look, let's try and approach this differently. Let's label our feelings appropriately instead of just saying, this is, I'm scared, I'm anxious, depressed, but I'm feeling this way. What are things that we can do? So sometimes asking questions instead of, how are you, right? Because that's a conversation killer. But asking things like, how can I be of help today for you? What are things that you're looking forward to today? What are things that you'd like to try and accomplish, right? So it's taking it out of that realm of sort of amorphous in the clouds and really bringing it down to helping them focus specifically on something to then be able to get them into a routine of normalcy instead of just saying to themselves, I'm useless, I'm unproductive, I'm apathetic, right? You're constantly labeling and then beating yourself up. We're shifting that. So with parents, it's real important to help with that, right? And not in a dictatorial way, like, when are you going to get a life? When are you going to get off the couch? When are you going to complete your homework? Right? Those things that type is not helpful. But how can I help you be successful today? What are things that you're looking forward to, right? So you're reframing. It's still the same idea, but it's a different shift on the question to help them explore and talk about and label appropriately what's going on for them.
Yeah, I have struggled in the past with depression, and I always tell people I'm so glad I did, because then when I saw it in my son, I recognized it. Mm-hmm. I hadn't gone through it myself. And many parents have not, thankfully. I would not have recognized what he was going through, and I would have approached it much differently. So that awareness as a parent is all the difference in how you're going to respond.
Right. Certainly. And obviously experiential knowledge, right, is always wonderful. But even though as a parent, you may not have that experiential knowledge or firsthand knowledge, you still know there's something that's off. And so instead of saying, what's wrong with you, right, you explore it differently. Hey, how can I help you organize yourself? How can I help you explore what some of your other passions are? Is there something you and I can do together? Right? That's a tough question, right? Because no teenager wants to do stuff with their parents typically. Sometimes they do, right? So it's trying to explore, how can I approach this to help them gently come into the conversation and explore their own issues.
Yeah, and realizing that they're probably more disappointed in themselves and in sleeping in than you would ever be.
Correct, right. And know that they're beating themselves up. So you don't need to help, right? You don't need to fuel, right? You need to recognize that, right? That they are probably doing this already to themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about it in another segment, but we can, at the end, we'll have some signs and symptoms to watch for. Is there anything you want to say about that?
That's hard, because everybody is different. See, I mean,
Right.
and that's the thing, especially now, like I'm used to seeing kids in the school environment. Now they're in their home environment. And for a lot of people, that's they act differently, they do things differently because there isn't that peer sort of pressure to perform, to do certain things. At home it's different. And so I don't necessarily want to label something and then have somebody say, oh well, that's not what I'm seeing, because it at the home it's something different. But really it's anything that takes you out of your comfort zone, which right now we're all out of our comfort zone, right? So
Right.
it's identifying that and looking at questions that can be asked to help draw them out. When you're dealing with someone who's suicidal, right? Or someone who's depressed or someone who's really anxious, you need to be able to monitor your own trauma, right? And put that in its proper place. Otherwise, the two of you will trigger each other, right? And
Right.
that's a real critical piece, right? Because if you're right, if your anxiety, for example, is being triggered by your child's
Right.
anxiety, that just is a recipe for, right? I mean, that's an explosion. Whereas, okay, I know I'm anxious, I know I'm feeling this way, I know that here's why, right? Then we get curious. Here's why I'm feeling anxious, right? And whatever that is. Okay, so how do I put my anxiety back in check so that I can be present to my child who is going through this? I'm not going through it, I feel it, but right now my child is going through this. How do I help be present for them to help them with what's happening in their life right now, as opposed to how am I being triggered by my kid and then I'm reacting poorly because it's triggering my trauma.
Yeah.
Hope that makes sense, right? Is
Oh,
we
definitely.
we need to get our own awareness and get our own trauma and anxiety in check, or at least recognize, so that then we can be present to that person, right? Someone once described it to me as the difference between compassion, being compassionate, and being empathetic, right? Empathetic means you feel what the other person is feeling, you take it on, you own it, it becomes yours. Well, in some cases that's very helpful, but in this case you want to be compassionate, meaning you can identify their issue but you're not taking it on, you're not owning it, right? You're helping them own their problem and helping them work through it through your ability to be compassionate, right? Otherwise, if you're both empathetic, then you're both at a loss. You're both feeling anxious, and now you got two people, right, that are spinning
Yeah.
anxiously instead
Yeah.
of one person who's spinning and one person who is helping that person with the spinning, helping to slow it down, right? That's very different.
Oh, that's excellent advice. And yeah, because we can easily get panicked and worried. And I'm talking to more than one parent in the last week that's been in that circumstance. So I
Mhm.
appreciate that.
We're trying to recalibrate our sense of normal. And so this is a challenge, right? I mean, it's not, look, I mean, I know I'm saying it. I'm a parent. It's hard to do, right? This is hard to do. The reality is, this is hard. I practice this every day, right? Some days I'm phenomenal, right? Other days I'm terrible.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just have to say, okay, yeah, you handled that very poorly. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Move on.
If you think your child is considering harming themselves, what to do? A lot of people think, a lot of parents are afraid to bring up the subject with their child. Can you speak?
Mm. Well, so I'm a big fan of bringing this stuff up, right? Because
Mhm.
part of it is labeling that emotion.
Right.
Now, if you, so there's a difference, right? And I want to make sure we're crystal clear. If you think that your son, daughter is in imminent danger, you either call 911, you call the police station, you go to the emergency room, right? And so that
Don't
piece
leave them
is
alone. Mhm.
absolutely. I mean, if you feel like this is imminent, and they have access or they have in their possession something that they could use to hurt themselves, then that is you err way on the side of caution.
Right.
However, if it's, hey, this is stuff that's come up, these are feelings that sometimes overwhelm me, okay, well, then you can start with a conversation around that, right? How do you help them? How do you identify, hey, let's talk about this. Why do you feel this is overwhelming you, right? Again, it's the same thing. Let's get curious about it. What's happening? So you can hear more. Allow them to talk about it. Because a lot of times, right, we live up here in the cerebral realm, and we don't give ourselves a chance to talk about it and to get it out and to put it, put some form around it. It lives and then it grows bigger and bigger and bigger until it's becomes something that is unwieldy. As we explore it, as we get curious about it, as we dialogue about it, it takes a more manageable form. And it's that form that we can use to help create an action plan for success, for survival, for, recalibrating, right, that trauma into productivity.
I have a note as we were talking, finding creative ways to connect with their friends. We had a parent who was talking about that. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, right. I mean, look, we are social beings, right? So
Right.
part of it is connection, and I do this with my adult friends. Now, I'm lucky. The property I have, right? I can set up tables, and so I have friends who come over, and I say, look, bring your own chair, bring your own beverage, whatever that is. Bring, if you want a snack, bring your snack, and then I'll provide the wipes. And if you need a fast face mask, I've got that, and we sit out and we just have a conversation, or I'll drive by their house and we'll talk.
Right.
They'll sit there. So look, I know how important it is, the social distancing, and so I'm look, I'm not saying, oh, hey, just go break all the rules and go hug all your friends,
Right. Not at all.
but
Yeah.
but certainly there are ways that we can be safe and be in contact, and by be in proximity, I shouldn't say contact, but be in proximity with each other to have that connection, right? We need that. One of the beautiful things about children is the ability of a parent to self-soothe, right? And not only do parents soothe their children, but they teach them how to soothe themselves. And we've lost that art, right? We get doses of dopamine
Right.
we're
Right.
with our friends. And so we need that as people. We need the serotonin, we need the dopamine, we need those shots to help stimulate us. And so
Mhm.
oftentimes, even just being in their presence, whether it's, in the car and they're in the driveway, or whether we set up a table, look, as a parent, if you're nervous, supervise it, right? Have have them come over and set it up. You stay here, you stay here. Great. Let them chat, right?
Yeah. Or I talked to another parent who even just drove her son around and let him talk to his friends while they were on the porch, and
Yeah.
he's in the car.
Right. It's
So,
wonderful.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
wonderful, and you're still staying safe, but you're also allowing them to have that stimulation that they need, right? The brain needs that,
Mhm.
right?
So as a parent, just recognizing how big this is to your son or daughter, how important it is, and
Yeah.
how it's impacting them possibly more than you might realize.
Oh, absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
And because teens, their crowd, their socialization is so critical. And it's not being, and which is this a wonderful realization, right? It's not being met by the phone.
Right.
Right? That's not doing it anymore. It used to be, because I could socially interact with you, I can also text, and that brings me a little bit of joy. But this, without this personal connection, isn't the same. And they're realizing that. And so
Right.
they need that connection. So anything we can do safely to make that happen, it's huge. It will bring huge dividends, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll wrap things up, Joe. Is there anything else that you can think of that you want to share with parents?
At this point in time, no. We've done a lot of sharing, but I just am appreciative of the time and being able to talk about this stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.